This is the Airbus A321XLR, and I'm sure you've heard of it before because it's been dominating headlines for the last year. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic piece of engineering, and a brilliant strategic move from Airbus to win market share from Boeing over long and thin routes. However, it's far from perfect, and despite having similar range and greatly reduced operating costs of a widebody flying the same route, there are a few significant drawbacks that almost no one talks about. So let's begin with pilot hour limits and crew rest areas. When discussing the capabilities of aircraft, it's normal to jump straight to raw numbers like range and fuel burn. But long-haul flights aren't limited by fuel alone. The human factor and duty time play a significant role. When it comes to flights exceeding 8 or 9 hours, rules such as flight time limitations and duty time are triggered. And the reason for these regulations is pretty simple. Fatigued pilots are a safety risk. Duty time doesn't just include flight time. The clock is started with pre-flight checks and taxi, and if there's a delay getting off the ground, then that's still time that pilots are focusing on holding positions and communicating with other pilots and air traffic control. On these longer flights, which have always typically been flown by wide bodies, there is another set of pilots ready to take over to let the first pilots get mandatory rest. On wide bodies like the 787 and A350, there are dedicated crew rest zones for sleep and relaxation. But on a narrow body like the A321XLR, there is no dedicated crew rest area. To solve this, airlines either have to block out several rows of passenger seats or assign crew to business class seats. Both of these remove revenue generating seats and reduce premium cabin capacity, leading to an increase in per seat operating cost. Coupled with the cost of paying an extra set of wages for the relief pilot, the already thin profit margins end up becoming even thinner. Passenger discomfort is also a big factor. Despite the modern airspace cabin featuring lower altitude and ambient lighting, the bathroom situation is a big problem on small narrow bodies flying 8 or 9 hours. With only 3 or 4 lavatories and a single aisle, queues will be constant and the aisle will be crowded. With a wide body, there is a second aisle which helps to ease crowding and reduce choke points. In addition, the effect of prolonged turbulence on a long-haul narrowbody is also often overlooked. As an example, a Dreamliner is more than twice as heavy as the A321XLR, and when it hits a pocket of unstable air, there is a much snappier and more violent response to the turbulence with a smaller plane. Because the A321XLR is shorter and thinner, there is less area to distribute the forces, and this prolonged bumpiness leads to amplified jet lag and higher fatigue. Our final point ties back, once again, to airline profits. And not everyone knows about this, but the passenger flights don't just carry people, and it's not just suitcases that take up space in the hold. On long-haul routes, a huge percentage of global air cargo is carried along with the baggage, including mail and other time-sensitive goods. The revenue generated from carrying cargo often covers fuel, and if the airplane isn't full, makes up for that lost revenue. And this is where the A321XLR runs into issues. We all know that fuel is stored in the wings, and of course this still applies to the XLR. But in order to increase the range by 700 nautical miles, Airbus had to add a rear center fuel tank in the hold of the plane. And this does two things. First, it adds weight and further limits payload. Next, it takes up space in the hold, and this permanently reduces available cargo volume on every flight. And because the A321XLR is a narrowbody, it didn't have all that much space to begin with. Without the revenue from carrying cargo, airlines rely entirely upon passenger demand, and that of course fluctuates all year round depending on the season, and this makes operating certain routes way more risky. When we combine lost revenue from improvised crew rest areas, lost revenue from reduced cargo, and reduced passenger comfort altogether, then the A321XLR does seem a bit overrated in my opinion. But I would love to hear your thoughts, so go ahead and drop a comment down below. And if you're sick of seeing AI slop all over aviation YouTube, then subscribe here for more real, authentic videos from me.